Hello, everyone, and welcome to our CanWatch Academy session with the International Aid Transparency Initiative. I'm really excited to be here. Folks will trickle in as they do, finding the links and all this kind of thing. My name is Julia Anderson, and I'm the CEO of the Canadian Partnership for Women and Children's Health. And I'm really excited about this session. I've been engaging in a little bit more depth with the folks at IATI. We became members at CanWatch and are really excited to learn alongside them about the important work they did recently, or they are doing. Recently, they put out a newsletter, which I encourage everyone to sign up for. And the article today or yesterday was around how organizations like all of yours can benefit from participating in IATI, using IATI data and actually becoming publishers. And I found it really quite compelling. One of the lines in there is IATI is capable of demonstrating and monitoring the interdependencies and relations in such a network, and the network they're referring to is kind of the complex landscape that now represents international development, where you don't have kind of a straight line of actors working. And so IATI can be a really important space for bringing more transparency, which of course is all about justice. So today's session is being delivered with the support and partnership of Global Affairs Canada, who are also proud partners with IATI and have engaged, I think, a fair bit as a donor, as one of the donors. We're meeting, of course, on a virtual platform. So all the 16 sessions as part of the CanWatch Academy are being undertaken virtually this year. And so we're coming from all over Canada. And of course, I think it's important to recognize then the various territories that we live, work, and play on as NGOs, as individuals across Turtle Island, and pay our respects to the Indigenous people that were here since the beginning of time. They're traditional guardians of this land. And, you know, as Canada, I was sharing with our guests from the States, is currently burning up. I think about, you know, some of the lessons that need to be drawn from that care for the land that was working a lot better before settlers came. So before diving into the session, this is the housekeeping notes that I need to share. Translation is available. It's down with a little globe interpretation. So you click on the language of your choice and whether or not you hear the background as well. The session is being recorded and will be shared after in the coming weeks on our website. So please, if you had a colleague who couldn't make it today, please do share it out and distribute it widely. We will have a question and answer session. We just discussed with the skilled facilitators of the session, and they want you to put all your questions in the chat box. There's going to be kind of two tiers of questions, which I will let them explain. But as you're going along and listening, please do put your questions in either language there, and we'll get it to them. And if you're having any difficulty, we have the very capable Tina La Rochelle, technical support. It says that in the chat. So please reach out to her if there's any issues. And she can problem solve like a master. So now I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our colleagues, Anna and Sarah. So Anna is the Outreach and Partnership Specialist at UNDP, which is where IATI is hosted currently. And Sarah is the Data Use and Partner Country Specialist with UNDP and IATI. And I've had the great privilege of meeting them before and was really excited that they specifically as individuals agreed to do this session. So with that, Anna and Sarah, I turn it over to you and take it away.
Thanks so much, Julia. And thanks also to CanWatch for having us here today. We're really excited to be here and to share some information on IATI with all of you. So as Julia just mentioned, my name's Anna Whitson. I'm the Outreach and Partnership Specialist for IATI, sitting at the United Nations Development Program in New York. And we also have my colleague here as well, Sarah McDuff, who is the data use and partner country support specialist, also sitting at UNDP in New York. So we're really pleased to be here today. Just a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So we've kind of got a very jam-packed agenda for you today. And just to note, with today's presentation, we're really just scratching the surface of what IATI is, what it might offer you, how you might want to use the data. And really using our data can sometimes be a journey. So really consider this session just an introduction to IATI. We'll cover at the end of the session different ways you can engage with IATI and different ways you can engage with the data going forward. But really, it can be a journey using this data. So don't feel overwhelmed. We're here to help. So what we're going to cover today is a little bit about IATI, what it is as an initiative, what kind of data it can offer. We'll give you a little bit of background about what's contained in the data, a little bit of information on how you can understand it, and then some information on how you can actually access the data. So we have kind of a suite of data access tools. It's open, publicly available data, free to use for anyone. So we'll kind of give you a primer on how you might be able to access that data. And then we'll spend the last bit of the session really doing some more hands-on work. So we want you to leave the session understanding a little bit about the ways you could use the data in your own work, how other civil society organizations are using the data, and what the data can tell us. And we'll do some, like I said, hands-on work at the end where we'll kind of walk you through some questions, right? So I want to find, all the humanitarian spending for Chad in 2022, right? These kind of things. How can you do that with IATI data? So we're going to really ground it and make it more tangible at the end. And then we'll close with, again, as I said, this is a journey. So we'll close with how you can engage with us going forward. But we wanted to start before we move on, maybe with just a quick poll. So I'm going to launch this poll just to, oh, the poll was already up apparently. Great. So could you guys see the poll? It looks like it's already completed. So it looks like, how familiar are people with in the room with IATI? I'm going to go ahead and share the results. And can you see, Sarah, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the results? Perfect. Okay, great. So we just kind of wanted to know who's in the room. How familiar are you with IATI? So it looks like over half of the people in the room are completely new. Great, you're in the right place. We're going to start from the beginning and walk you through. 35% know a little bit, but are definitely here to learn more about what this is all about. And then 12% of you say you're an expert. So maybe we'll call on some of you later with some questions. So good to know we have a good mix of people in the room. So we're going to dive now a little bit more into the meat of the presentation, but just to say, if you do have any questions on this segment of the presentation, so kind of the introduction to the initiative, what is this thing, what kind of data are we talking about, just go ahead and put those in the chat. We have a lot of content today, so we just want to make sure we capture everyone's questions, and we can also follow up with anyone that we don't get to today. So anything that you are wondering about, just go ahead and throw it in the chat. But we'll start with an introduction to IATI and its data. So Sarah, maybe you can move to the next slide. Great. Okay, so this is just a little bit of background. Where did this thing, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, where did it come from and why did we need it, right? So I'm sure you're all very well aware, especially over the past couple of decades, there's a lot of new players in this development cooperation space, right? So many new actors are undertaking development and humanitarian activities. It used to be a lot more government to government funding, but now, multilateral organizations like the UN have come into play, civil society organizations, the private sector, foundations. So there was really a need to kind of systematize and make comparable the data on what these organizations are funding, where they're funding it, what are they doing, because it's not just a government to government approach anymore. There's also a lot of organizations that are potentially not working in the country in which they're providing development cooperation funding, right? So, non-resident partners that don't have a formal relationship with the government. There was a need to capture data on what activities were being undertaken by non-resident partners, where was the funding going, what was it being allocated to? So with all of this in play, there was and really is still a need for this kind of comprehensive on development and humanitarian activities. And what I think you'll see as we go through, and where IATI can play a huge role, is that we're wanting to make sure that all of this information on development cooperation, what's being funded, where it's being funded, how much is being funded, what sectors is it, and all of this information is available for actors to inform the allocation of their national resources, to make sure that we're not duplicating activities, to make sure there's accountability injected into these activities, et cetera. So in 2008, the international community came together in Accra and made this political commitment to make this type of data open and accessible and free for anyone to use. They wanted the data to be timely and forward-looking and transparent about what they were funding, where, and how. So out of that, IATI was really born in 2008. We'll go on to the next slide. And just really quickly, when we say IATI, what do we really mean, right? So IATI is a global initiative. It's a voluntary initiative. It's not mandatory for anyone to be a member or to publish data on their activities to IATI. But it's a global initiative that's really trying to improve the transparency of development and humanitarian resources. And at the end of the day, why we're doing this is to have more information that can help us address poverty and crises, right? So again, it's a voluntary initiative, and at its heart, it has a data standard, which we'll talk a little bit about over the next couple of slides. But just also quickly wanted to mention that it is a membership-based organization. So there are members that we have almost 100 right now that have a role in kind of stewarding and governing the initiative, and also help us fund our services and activities. So we have members from governments, from developing country governments, bilateral governments, multilaterals, lots of different development partners, but also from civil society. So as you can see here, this is a list of our civil society members, and CanWatch has recently joined us, so we're really excited to have CanWatch into the fold. And then just quickly, in terms of why we're here, IATI has a secretariat, which is currently run by UNDP, UNOPS, and a CSO called Development Initiatives out of the UK. That helps with the day-to-day functioning of the initiative under really the strategic guidance of our members. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so that was a lot of talking about what this thing kind of is at a very high political level, but what does IATI really do? So as we said, we have all these organizations, and they're all trying to contribute to addressing international poverty and crises. They all have a lot of data on, what they're funding, what projects they're undertaking, what activities, but maybe it's in their own specific format, in their own system. So what we're able to offer as IATI is a data standard, right? So this is a way that all of these organizations can make their data comparable in a data standard that they then publish their data to in our suite of online tools. So when that data is published to IATI, it goes online, it becomes open, accessible, comparable for anyone in the world to use free of charge. Go to the next slide. So in terms of how it's published and accessed, as I said, we have this suite of publishers. So these are the people that are giving us their data, right? And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about who those people are. But they gather their internal data, map it against our data standard, and publish it online through IATI, right? So this is pulled then into our suite of tools, which Sarah's gonna demo for you a little bit later, but is also open and available for anyone who wants to use it to use. So for instance, there are lots of platforms that are using this, this data. I know CanWatch's Project Explorer, I believe, uses IATI data, the EU's own transparency portal, UNDP's transparency portal. So this is open for anyone really to use and to build on top of it. But today we're gonna cover IATI's own corporate kind of tools to show you really what we mean by this data and how it can be used. But again, once it's online, it's free for anyone to use. So in terms of when we say publishers, right, what do we mean? So we currently have over 1,500 IATI publishers, which is any organization that's putting their data into the IATI data standard and is making it available to us through our suite of tools, right? So again, this is a voluntary process. So it's not a comprehensive database of information. However, we do have most of the major bilateral governments, most of the major multilateral organizations We're definitely working on getting some of the bigger INGOs, some of the bigger development finance institutions. So again, we have over 1,500 publishers that have published their information from all of these different constituencies, which is not always easy to find at the country level or in national systems. We'll go to the next slide. And just to make this a little bit more tangible in terms of who's publishing, this is just a slide that we prepared for, a non-comprehensive list of examples from the Asia Pacific region. So these are some of the big organizations that are publishing data for Asia Pacific countries. So you can see these bilaterals here, a lot of the major donors from bilaterals, multilaterals, obviously very important in the region, the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, Gavi, UN agencies, a lot of the large INGOs, some private sector organizations. So really a comprehensive, a very comprehensive, robust list of publishers who again, might also not have country offices, right, in these specific developing countries. So I guess we'll go to the next slide. Okay, great. So when we say IATI data, what do we actually mean, right? So what kind of information is contained in the IATI data standard? So of course, when people come and look at IATI data, a lot of the time what they're looking for when they're looking at development cooperation information is the financial information, right? So they want to know basic information, what is the title, the description of the activity, is it current, is it past, right? Is it currently being operated? And then they want to know, who's funding the activity, who's implementing it, right? So who's participating in these activities. So that's something you can find in IATI as well. But really the bread and butter and kind of the meat of why people come to IATI is for the financial information. So one of the key things to say here is that IATI data is often forward-looking, right? So we ask publishers to publish forward-looking data as much as possible, right? So this is budgets, what they're planning to spend, right? Because this information is super useful at the country level, especially for governments, civil society organizations that are looking to know who's going to be funding in my sector, in my country of interest, these kind of things, right? So this is something very specific to IATI that's a huge value add, is this kind of forward-looking data, right? And then you can also see what's been spent, right? So commitments, disbursements, expenditures, this kind of thing. So the financial data is a huge, huge piece of this. And again, not all of this other information is mandatory, but publishers can choose to add geographical information. So where is the money being spent? Even coordinates in some cases, if you're, say, building a school, where is that school located? These kind of things. And then importantly, classifications for the data. So this is, what sector is it being classified in, the aid type, whether it's or finance type, whether it's a grant or a loan, whether it's humanitarian funding. And then also you can link to, oh, I'm sorry, I just had like a weird technical glitch here where I can't see myself anymore. Hi. Okay. I'm so sorry. I just have to pause for a second. I have a technical glitch. I'm not sure what's happening. I think I came unplugged. Sorry, hold on, pause 1 second.
We can still see you, so.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my screen came unplugged. That was fun. Okay, so apologies for that. Yeah, great. So, and another thing that you'll see definitely in IATI data is the ability to link to other data, right? So to link to related activities. And then at the end of the day, something that might be really interesting for this group is, the results. So what has been achieved with these activities. So this is kind of what's contained in the IATI data, and Sarah will give you more of a detailed look at this when we demo it later. I just have a couple more slides before I'm going to hand over to Sarah to show you kind of the tools themselves and demo the tools. But in order to do that, I think it's super useful to understand a little bit about the data itself. So I'm just going to give you some kind of high level information before Sarah demos. So in terms of the data source, as we said, are these publishers, right? So over 1,500 organizations that are publishing data on their development and humanitarian activities to IATI. Within our tools, the data is refreshed about every 3 hours. So once a publisher makes that data available to IATI, it's within our tools within, on average, about 3 hours. So the timeliness of this data is really key as well. The availability of the data, as I said, it's really dependent on when the publisher publishes. So best practice is for publishers to publish at least quarterly, if not monthly. There are some that publish more often than that. There are some that publish less, right? So it just depends on the publisher. So you could see some data gaps here due to the data not yet being published by the publisher. And again, not all of this data is mandatory, right? So this is a data standard with some fields that are just added value, right? So the publishers can decide for themselves where they want to publish data and what data they feel comfortable publishing. And then in terms of just spending, and I'm sure Sarah will look at this in the demo, but when we say spending, in IATI, you have to aggregate disbursement and expenditure transactions, which I'm sure Sarah will talk about later, but just something to know before you start looking at the data. And then in terms of the advantages, so I think we already went through some of these, but just to say, like, to really drive home some of the key added value of IATI data, the detail that we have. So the data is extremely rich. There's a lot of data, but again, we have some variations in the way that the publishers publish the data, right? So what they choose to include can vary, but the detail is very robust. The data is also available in a standardized way. So by the nature of having a data standard, the data is published in a standard and comparable format, right? So that's hugely important when you're looking to do analysis with this data. Frequency. So IATI publishers, as we said, the best practice is to publish at least quarterly, but even quarterly is much more frequently than most other data sources. If you're familiar with the OECD DAC data, that's published usually annually. It's backward looking, these kind of things. So in terms of being useful, if the data is up to date, if it's forward looking, it's being released in a timely manner, that really makes the data much more useful. And then lastly, as I mentioned, you can look at planned spending in IATI. So again, in terms of management and allocating resources and reducing duplications, really looking at what donors are planning to spend in the future is extremely important. And this is one of the only data sources that you can actually do that with. I think we'll go on to the next one. This is my last slide before I hand over to Sarah. But we just want to be upfront about the limitations. There are some limitations of IATI data. And of course, it's an iterative process and we're always looking to improve. But there are some limitations. And again, when you're looking to analyze this data, we as the IATI Secretariat can help you kind of, navigate some of these limitations as well. So as we said, there's a lot of very rich, very detailed information, but the quality of the data can vary according to the publisher, right? So they get to decide what to release, when to release it, what they're going to include. So frequency, well, on the flip side, many large publishers publish, say, each month or at least each quarter. Some, especially smaller publishers who might not have the capacity to do so, update their data not so often. And then just kind of the complexity of the data, right? So in terms of, we know development cooperation is complex, the data is complex, there can be double counting within the data, there can be different approaches that publishers are using. So again, some of this injects a bit of complexity into using the data, but again, we as the IATI Secretariat are really here to help you kind of navigate some of those challenges. So I'll stop there and I'm going to hand over to Sarah, and she's going to kind of give you an understanding of and a demo of some of our tools so that this starts really to come to life for you and not be so kind of conceptual. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Anna. So now we're going to dive into a little bit of how do you actually access this information. I think that key to kind of beginning to understand the information is diving into some of the data and taking a look at it and seeing what kinds of questions you have and things you want to explore with the information, and then you can kind of begin to make all of the background information that Anna has given to you make a little bit more sense. So I have a couple slides and then I'll dive into the demo. But as Anna mentioned at the beginning, currently for IATI, as an initiative, we provide multiple different data access tools, which, meet different purposes depending on the tool. And I will go through all three of the major tools. But I will just flag that there's sort of been a long road that we've been going down to be able to consolidate these tools into one data portal. So that's in the future, hopefully in the near term. But for now, we have these different tools that have different functionalities. So it is kind of important to understand maybe which one you might go to, depending on what you're trying to look at. So, and your level sort of expertise in the IATI data standard, and your level of comfort, with Excel and doing analysis and things like that. So two of our easiest tools to use that are most accessible are dPortal and the Country Development Finance Data Tool. So if you're familiar with IATI, you could be familiar with dPortal. It's been the data access tool that has been around for the longest. And dPortal, it allows you to kind of easily search for activities. And it is the best portal for looking at sort of all information for an individual activity. So if you wanted to look at a specific activity taking place and find out all the information, like what are the activity dates, what are the objectives, like how much money has been spent, what sectors is it targeting, all of this information sort of in one place, in addition to like things like documents that have been included, and the more detailed information that's not as easily accessible in our other tools. dPortal is the place to go. But it's not as easy to use for analysis, and that's where the Country Development Finance Data Tool comes in. This tool was initially designed to, provide data for country level stakeholders. And I'll walk you through kind of its offerings, but it allows you to easily download data that has already been sort of transformed or processed, so that you can kind of easily make sense of the IATI data. As Anna said, there's a lot of data fields, there's a lot of information, but this tool kind of simplifies that analysis, so you can kind of look at how much money was spent in 2022 according to what publishers have provided to IATI. And it provides this like Excel formatted data that is designed to be easily analyzed in pivot tables. And we have a third tool, which I will also show you as well. It's called our IATI Data Store, and sort of like the public facing tool of it is called the Data Store Search. And I will show that to you, but it allows you to access all of the raw data that's published to IATI. So if you like to get into very much into the weeds and the details and process your own data, then that might be the tool for you. There's also an API that allows you to access the information via the API if that's of interest. So I will do the demo now. So I'm going to jump into all three of the tools in 4 different steps here. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and start sharing the other one. Give me just 1 second. All right, so hopefully we are good now with hopefully you can see the Country Development Finance Data Tool on your screen. All right, sorry, just 1 second. My video thing is, anyway, it's okay. Okay, so this is the Country Development Finance Data Tool, and we'll start here and then we'll move to dPortal and then go to Data Store Search. But just, I'm going to explain a little bit about what you're looking at, how to navigate the tool, and then sort of the kind of analysis that you can do, the spreadsheets you can download, things like that. And don't hesitate to put any questions that you have as I'm going through this in the chat, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible. So if you land on the page, this is like sort of the main page for the tool. And I'm wondering if Anna can drop that in the chat, the tool link, so everyone can kind of, if you're interested, you can go there and kind of follow along. But a couple key things I want to go over before we dive into the data itself is that this tool is available in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. So if you want to explore it in French, please feel free to do so. And there's some important information here in the About section. So like if you're interested in the methodology, how we process the data, it's available here. And if you're interested in looking at the guidance, which I'd highly recommend, if you're interested in using IATI data, because this doesn't always only provide guidance on how to use the tool, it also provides some explanation of the data fields that are included, and it goes into a bit more in depth on that. And it's also available in multiple languages as well. So just showing you here that the guidance is available here. But if we go back to the homepage, the main functionalities are all here on the homepage. So the original functionality when we launched this tool was to provide access to data files by country. So you can see here that you can download the files by country. So if you're interested in just doing analysis for Afghanistan, for example, you can click on this file, download it in any of these languages, and it's going to give you the full set of data for Afghanistan, which means it's all the data that's been published to IATI and the subset of data fields that are included in this tool. But you can download and analyze the data and pivot tables. The easier functionality to begin with would be these data dashboards, which I'll show you, and then also a custom data download, which basically allows you to tell it what columns you want, what data you want, filter it how you'd like, and then download your own customized spreadsheet. So I will walk you through how to use all of these. So, and the dashboards are available by recipient country, reporting organization, and sector category. So if you click on Explore Data Dashboards, this is going to take you to some of the summary dashboards. And I think this is the easiest way to kind of begin to get a sense of what you can do with this information. So what you are looking at here is it's in USD, but you can change it to Euro. And this in this map here is the resources budgeted to be spent in 2022. If we want to switch that to spending, we can switch it to spending. And this shows you the money that was spent in 2022 in all of these different countries. If we go over one of the countries like Brazil, we can see the total amount that was spent in 2022. Of course, you can customize this. You can look at it in a graph instead, in a table. But it gives you a sense of how much money was flowing to these countries from all of the organizations that are publishing data to IATI in this particular year. If you scroll down, then this is also showing you the money spent by reporting organizations. So as you might expect, the World Bank here is spending the most money, or it's very comparable, I guess, to the U.S. Agency for International Development. USAID does not provide budgets, which is why that blue column is missing. As Anna said, sometimes organizations don't provide data in all the data fields as they're not all mandatory. But you can kind of see here the spending by reporting organization. Again, this is showing you 10 results. So of course, there's a lot more organizations. You can increase the number. You have this list. You can look at it in a table. This allows you to also then just click and go to the individual dashboard for this organization. But if we scroll down to the bottom, then we also have by sector category. So it's the same kind of concept, right? Like the money that was spent in 2022 in these different sectors. And so you can see health here, which might be of particular interest to this group. And we'll look at the health sector a little bit closer, but has the same sort of functionality here. And you can download the underlying data for all of these graphs and tables. So you can just click on the Excel download. You can download the summary data for anyone that you might be interested in. And then you can also filter these dashboards by other criteria, right? So some of those other data fields that Anna showed to you, you can filter by that. So like, for example, so you've got the reporting organization here. You could look at only sort of loans or grants. You could choose only humanitarian activities. You could choose a particular sector. But like, for example, let's say I wanted to look at spending only by UN agencies. You can click on this like reporting organization grouping, click on the United Nations, apply that. It's going to give you all the UN organizations. You can see which filters have been applied here. And then you have basically spending just by the UN. So you can see these are all UN organizations that are listed here in the reporting organization. So those are the summary dashboards, but of course you might be more interested in a particular country or reporting organization. So you can click on by recipient country or region. You could look at Pakistan, for example. And this dashboard is a little bit different, but it's similar for the recipient country, reporting organization, and sector category. So I'll go through those graphs with you quickly, but the functionality is all the same as I showed you in the first summary dashboards. So here at the top, you have a summary just showing budgets and spending across 6 years. So, this is backward looking, this is forward looking, right? As Anna said, there's a lot of forward looking data in IATI that is provided in the budget data field. So gives, the amount of that data decreases the more years you go out, of course. But you can see here for the resources that are budgeted to be spent in 2024 that have already been reported, 2025, 2026. And then, of course, you could drill down to see which organizations are projecting to spend that money, which is kind of what you see here, right? So again, this is still 2022, but it shows the data by reporting organization, by sector category, by finance type, which is whether it's a grant, loan, or a variety of other categories. Aid type is whether it's like project support or budget support, or there's various other modalities, but it's like the modality in which the resources are delivered. And then you have the reporting organization type, which is the grouping of organizations, right? Whether it's multilateral, bilateral, NGO, this kind of thing. And then this is the humanitarian and development. And then at the bottom here, you've got the individual activities. Right. So as Anna started with, like, all of this data is contained within individual activities, and then we're able to analyze it to be able to generate these different graphs and charts and things. So these are the individual activities. And if you click on these links, you are taken to the D-Portal page, and I will show you how that works in just a minute. But you can see some of the activities, and we could look at the ones with the most spending. So it looks like spending in 2022 in Pakistan, this building resilience with active counter-cyclical expenditures program is the one that had the most spending in Pakistan in 2022. All right, so if we go by like reporting organization, and you again, like, you can click on it and see them all on that one page, or you can search. So like if we search for Gavi, for example, we can look at, specifically at Gavi, and see where Gavi is spending money. Obviously, all of their spending is in health, which makes sense. They're doing all project type interventions based on their reporting, all grants. They categorize themselves as a multilateral, and it's all development spending. And then you can see all of Gavi's activities here at the bottom that you could further explore. And similar to the other dashboards, you can filter if you wanted to look at a particular recipient country, for example. Let's see if they're doing activities in Afghanistan. Yes, so you can see specifically in Afghanistan for Gavi. So that's this dashboard. So if we go to the sector category, I'm just going to quickly take a look at health. So again, it's the same concept. You can, and so you can sort of like use multiple dashboards to achieve the same things, but it allows you to kind of filter the data and look at the kinds of things that you might be interested in. But this is resources spent in health in 2022, or budgeted and spent. So if you go to spending, we'll go to spending here. So again, like, you can see, the list of countries in which health spending was the most. You can see like Nigeria is here at the top. Well, actually, if you go by spending, let's see, India is higher. So you can sort it and see, but it's the same setup here. So again, we have the activities at the bottom. And I think I'm going a little long, so I'm going to speed it up and go to the next thing here. But this is the custom data download. And when we do a couple of the exercises at the end, I will go through this in a little more detail, but I just kind of wanted to show you that this is where you can sort of set up and download your own spreadsheet of data. So I was trying to think about what might be of interest to this group, and I just picked a couple things, and I may or may not be correct, but so you can add the columns here, like where you add like whatever data you want to appear in your spreadsheet. So I added reporting organization. And then I think like I was also going to add, maybe we would want to look at Global Affairs Canada. And then perhaps under the sector, we would want to look at maybe something like reproductive health or family planning. So these are like more detailed sectors. There's, the sector category, and then there's the individual sectors. So then we can look here and see like the activities that meet those criteria. So I'm also just going to add the sector here, so you can see that. But you can see which ones are reproductive health care, which ones are family planning, and see the different activities. And then you can also download that data. So if we wanted to download, then you can download it here, and it shows you 10 results here, but it's going to give you all of the results in the spreadsheet. So you can see the downloaded data here. And of course you can add as many columns as you want. So if you wanted to know like which organization received the resources, you can add the receiver organization here. If you wanted to know what the finance type was, you can add the finance type here. So you can see this activity here at the top. The organization that published that to IATI was Global Affairs Canada. The recipient country was Tanzania. This is the activity identifier, which is a code that's unique to that activity. You have the title, the sector is reproductive health care. And then we have the government, the Ministry of Finance received the money for this. It's a grant. This is how much was budgeted in 2022, and this is how much was spent. So just to give you an idea of the information that is available here. So if you click on the links here, it will take you directly to dPortal. So let me just show you. If you just click on the link, it takes you to the dPortal page. And I've pulled up a couple that are good examples just so I can kind of walk you through the information that's on dPortal. But basically, this gives you all of the activity information that is available for most all of the information that's available for an individual activity. So I'm going to show you one from UNICEF first. And then I'm going to show you one for Global Affairs Canada. And I'll just kind of quickly go through it, but we can share the links to these individual activity pages afterwards in case there's any questions, because there's a lot of information here. So basically, this is the activity project title, right? Activity project title. And then we have all of these are documents. So a lot of times organizations will publish all kinds of documents like, the results framework and the program document and all kinds of things that can be useful depending on what you're interested in sort of researching or understanding about development cooperation. We have the start and end dates here. You can see who's involved. When it comes to UNICEF activities, there can be a lot of actors. And so you can see here, this is like a very much clearly an activity being implemented at the local level. So you have a lot of different recipient organizations at the local level. There's a lot of organizations involved. And then you have, this is a description of the activity. You have a policy marker, so you can see that gender equality is the principal objective of this activity, which could be useful to understand. All the money's going to Afghanistan. As Anna mentioned, sometimes there are coordinates, so these are the coordinates of the project locations. You can see here the sort of the sectors that are being targeted, which are reproductive health care, health policy, and administrative management. You can see the SDG that's being targeted here. And if you go to the bottom, you've got all the money stuff. So I won't go through this in detail, but it's like, basically it shows you the budgets, and they're each, there's a lot of budget periods. We've got the transactions, which show you the money they're receiving. So, like, of course, we know UNICEF is a multilateral and they're receiving money from different governments, so they can record the money they're receiving. That's all listed here. There's a lot of them. Then we have commitments. And then at the bottom, oops, I skipped them, but this is probably, these are all the expenditures. Sorry, I know I'm scrolling through this really quickly, but just wanted to get to the bottom where you can see the results information. So, as Anna said, there is a lot of results data that's reported to IATI, but it's really only meaningful in the context of one, like one organization may publish their results data in a standardized way, right? There's a structure in IATI for publishing results data. But the way each organization sort of tracks results can be different. So, you kind of have to look at it individually to try and make sense of that information. So that is sort of an example, and I pulled up another one, but I think we will skip this one. But this is an example of Global Affairs Canada activity, and they report all of their information, well, a lot of the information in French and English. So if it's available in French and English, then it will be made available as such. So, but this is just another example of an activity. So just quickly to show you, so this is the main page of dPortal. And so dPortal is another way where you can sort of search for activities. It's just that when the results you get, sort of like what you can download in terms of an Excel sheet, is less easy to analyze. But for example, if you wanted to look for, again, we could look at Afghanistan, activities taking place in Afghanistan. We could look at Canada. There we go. And then we can explore the results here. And then there's various different ways you can explore the activities. So there's 2 active projects, it looks like. And then you can click on these activities, and then you go to that same activity page that I showed you. So basically, there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of filter and find activities. This also has a really useful keyword search. If you're looking to find, specific keyword like tuberculosis, like in an activity description or in a title, this is a really useful way to do that. I realize this is a lot. So this is dPortal. Okay, and then one final tool, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, but if you're interested in this and want to learn more, don't hesitate to contact us and reach out, and we're happy to do sort of one-to-one training sessions to discuss further. But the last tool that I mentioned it's called Data Store Search. And this tool, so you can search by keyword here as well, but its main functionality here is to be able to do sort of a more complicated query that gives you all of the raw data that's published to IATI. So you can like add a filter here, for example, like looking for humanitarian activities. And so like if you see here, it's like all of the data fields, but you kind of have to know the IATI data standard because there's a lot of fields here. It's a bit complicated. But so then you click run. This is really easy to sort of consume. It lists the activities. It also links to dPortal with these activities. And then you can download this information in Excel, but I'm just going to show you quickly what that looks like so you can kind of see the difference. But I picked something where I'm downloading all humanitarian activities, so that's probably going to take a while. Let's see. Hold on, let me go back over here. Okay, I think this is a little bit more manageable. So these are activities in Albania. And then we have the data here. But as you can see, it's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more processing that's required on your side to be able to make use of this. So this is all the raw data that like an organization publishes through our data standard. But it takes a bit more to process that. But if you're interested in working with the API or the raw data, we're happy to support you with that. All right. So let me pause there. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and go back to the presentation. All right, so I think I'm checking to see. I see there's maybe a couple of questions. I know Anna has put some links. Okay, so no questions in the chat yet that I'm seeing now yet, but maybe I'll hand back to Anna. I think she's going to go through a few slides on what IATI data can tell us, and then we'll go back to some exercises at the end, so then you can kind of hopefully follow along a little bit more and try some exercises to explore some of these tools.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that demo. I know it's hard there's so much data and there's so much information. So again, that's why we said at the beginning, this is your intro. And it's a journey, but we're here to support you. But I think thanks, Sarah, for that really useful demo. So let's just go to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about, now that you've kind of seen the data, you've seen kind of our tools, what can the data actually tell us and how are organizations actually using the data, right? So as Sarah helpfully demoed, obviously, we're mainly looking at projections and spending, right? So projections, that forward-looking data. So what resources are going to be spent in the country, or can we expect will be spent in the country, right? So this is projections by organizations on what they're budgeting up to 3 years in advance, and that can be broken down by quarter. And then on the flip side, spending. So really kind of backward looking, how much money did they actually spend in each quarter of a fiscal year, right? So you can, again, break that down by quarter. So these are the two things that people are really interested in looking at, are the kind of projection side and the spending side. But again, you can really drill down, as Sarah showed you. So not only what organizations are providing the resources, but who's receiving them. What activities are they targeting? What sectors are they targeting? Modality and finance type, as Sarah showed you in the dashboards. What locations? And then, in some cases, what results did the activity achieve? So again, this is kind of what we're looking at. These are the kinds of questions that you can answer with the IATI data. And we'll just go to the next slide. And I know some of you here are probably meal officers, or you're looking more at this from like accountability angle. So we just wanted to provide a quick note on the results data. And as Sarah said, there's no real standardized way of reporting results in IATI because it's also not mandatory for publishers, right? So you're not going to see it for every every activity. You won't see results. But when you do, generally, you're looking either at kind of an output, meaning like well, you're a meal expert, so I don't know if I need to explain to you, but the output of the activity, the outcome, or the impact of the activity, right? And then in some cases, indicators that are either numerical or descriptive, in some cases, results documents, right? But as Sarah said, in some cases, there's very robust results information, and sometimes there isn't. So just a note on that, since we know that there's some meal officers in the room. Okay. So that was a lot of information, but just to kind of ground this into why you should care about it, right? So why is it relevant for civil society organizations, and how are some civil society organizations using this data? So what we've seen in working with civil society over the past couple of years is basically these 5 kind of key ways that civil society organizations are wanting to use the data, right? So the first, and I think really probably the number one, is for accountability purposes, right? So organizations are wanting to provide feedback on whether projects, activities are working, making sure resources are spent as planned, as the implementing agencies are saying they're being spent. So really this accountability angle, I think, is really key for a lot of organizations. Probably second to that would be evidence-based advocacy, right? So as Sarah showed you in that in the dashboard, it's really easy to see kind of what donors are funding, where they're funding it, and to make a case as necessary for a different allocation of resources. So you could advocate with Global Affairs Canada for more funding for health or education, more funding in a particular country, region, these kind of things. So this is a really useful tool for that. Also coordination. So a lot of organizations are interested in seeing what other organizations are working in the sectors that they're working at, the locations they're working at, to either partner with them, tailor their own projects, reduce duplications, these kind of things. So it's a very powerful tool for that. And then lastly, research and funding. So research also kind of like ties in with this advocacy angle, but of course, we see a lot of people wanting to use this data to inform, policy advocacy, including uncovering expenditure issues or better understanding the priorities of donors, governments, civil society. So there's a really big kind of research interest here as well. And then lastly, funding. So this is also something that civil society has brought to our attention as a use case that is very interesting for them. So when we know that every CSO has to fundraise. It's kind of the nature of the beast. So it does provide an opportunity to see which grant making organizations are active in whatever country, region, sector that you're working in. And seeing which organizations they fund. So this can help you kind of do landscape analysis for possible funding opportunities, possible partnerships, this kind of thing. And then I think we have like 2 more slides here. So we just wanted to, again, ground this even more to make it really tangible for you. So in terms of why it's relevant for civil society, these are some actual use cases that we've seen in each of these areas that I just outlined. So for instance, I think a really interesting one that's happened relatively recently is a CNN article, a CNN investigation that used IATI data and uncovered kind of a storyline around, some Western governments who have pledged to support LGBTQI plus rights, actually funding supporting organizations that had a role in pushing through a bill in Ghana that could introduce harsh sentences against sexual and gender minorities' rights, right? So basically Western governments kind of saying one thing and doing another through who they're funding. And they were able to see that through the funding chain by using IATI data. Another, I think on the advocacy side, really interesting during COVID, Save the Children UK actually used IATI data to look at the impact of UK aid cuts. And this was kind of during the COVID period, seeing that, children were actually bearing the brunt of the cuts, and they were able to do that through looking at IATI data. On the coordination side, we have a kind of like a recent new partner called SEBI Livestock. So it's the Center for Supporting Evidence-Based Interventions in Livestock. So clearly it's very niche, but they developed a livestock project portal. So this is a portal that pulls in IATI data, and the aim of that portal is to improve coordination in the livestock stock sector, capitalizing on IATI data. Just quickly go to the next slide. And then the last 2 here, and again, this is just to give you a flavor. There's so many more use cases and so many more examples here, but just to give you a flavor of kind of what some CSOs are doing with the data. Georgetown University actually conducted a research project to assess funding for mental health included in the COVID-19 response. So they used the IATI data to assess this, and they found that a very small amount of funding in the COVID-19 response was actually directed towards mental health causes, and they were able to do that through using IATI data. And then lastly, on the funding side, World Vision UK actually uses the IATI data to see who is funding what in its main priority countries and areas. And they also kind of look at plan secting by sector to see where there might be new opportunities for funding coming up, right? And we actually have some more cases of this, like a webinar on this specific case that we're happy to share later, where they explain this in a little bit more depth. But yeah, I'll just kind of stop there because I think that gives you a little bit of an introduction to how some CSOs are using this data to maybe start getting you thinking about how you could use it in your own work. And we have a short time left, so I'm going to hand back over to Sarah to kind of take us through some tangible examples of how you can do different things with the data. So actually like solving questions with the data. And I think I'll just hand over to Sarah, and Sarah, you can go through the, if people have examples of their own that they want to assess.
Yes, thank you. So now is the time where we want you to think about all this information we've just given you and think about like how you might potentially see this useful in your own work. And what kinds of questions you might have. So, I mean, still feel free to like share any questions that you have about the data, and we'll try to answer those as well, or about the initiative. I mean, any questions you have are welcome. But if you have a specific question, like a research question, or like, I want to figure out this, like, it would be useful if I could understand this. Can I figure this out with the IATI data? Please share that in the chat. We will go through a couple of examples, and then we will definitely come back to anything you want to explore and try and answer your questions with the data sort of in real time. So please don't hesitate to share those things. All right. So I think I'm going to have to share the screen here so that we can show this slide as well as the D portal. But this is some of the exercises that we want to go through. So we're starting with an exercise on D portal. So I would encourage everyone to click on that D portal link that was shared in the chat. And then we're going to go through and try and find this activity and answer these questions, looking at the specific activity. Let me just check the chat quickly. Okay. Oh, thank you. That's a good solution. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and share the tool again. All right, so hopefully we are good to go here. So, okay, so we're gonna go to D portal. And as I said, hopefully, I don't know if I said this clearly enough, but in the search bar, you can search for keywords, activity titles. It depends on kind of what you're looking for. But the idea here is like, maybe a particular activity, maybe your own activity, or you've heard of an activity and you want to learn more about that activity. The easiest place to do that is on D portal. So the one listed here, and Anna has put in the chat the directions here, but I'm just going to walk you through and feel free to follow along. So I'm going to type the title here. All right, so I'm going to explore the results to see the different activities. So there are a total of 5 projects, and what you can immediately see here is actually there's a couple of there's like different stages of the project that are reported sort of separately. And also that the World Bank Trust Funds publishes separately from the World Bank. So this is, you begin to see some of the complexities of the data here with this specific activity. But if you click on, let's see, it's this one, which is, go back here. It is the first one that's listed here, I believe. Let me just double check. Yes, correct. It's the first one that's listed. And let me just go back just to show you. So it's this one that shows the commitment of 60 million with an end date of 3/30/2023. So you're going to click on that one. And let's see if we can answer these questions. So what was the actual start date of the project? So to find that, we're going to scroll down to these yellow boxes. And you can see here that there are planned start dates and actual start date, and planned end date and actual end date. And so the actual start date of the project was April 14th of 2017. And then the next 2 questions are on the organizations participating in the activity. And that information is going to be found just below the activity dates. And you can see here, it says who's involved, who are the participating organizations. And here you can see the role of this organization is funding. And this is, a part of the World Bank, the International Development Association. And so you can see that as the funding organization. And it says who are the implementing organizations. And that is the Ministry of Economy and Finance and the Ministry of Rural Development. So those are the implementing organizations. The next question is, in how many locations is this project taking place? Looks like here, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks like they listed 8 geolocations where the project is taking place. Which OECD DAC sectors does this activity target? So if you scroll down, you're going to see the sectors. So these are the OECD DAC sectors. You can see here public transport services, which is 98%, and multi-hazard response preparedness, which is 2%. So you can see that these are the OECD DAC sectors that this activity is targeting. And how much money was dispersed on 30th of June, 2022. So to find that, we have to go down to the financial section, which is towards the bottom. So if we keep going down here, this is like the whole financial overview. So this gives you a summary of the financial information. Then we have the budgets, but we're looking for disbursement. So we're going to keep going down. There are lots of budgets because they report their budgets monthly, like on a monthly basis, it looks like. So there are a lot of budgets here. Let's see. So if we go down here to the transactions, we have the disbursements. So 30 June 2022, there's a lot of disbursements as well. Keep going. So it looks like there are a couple of different disbursements that happened on 30 June 2022. So you can see those here. So it's like 1.9 million, 2.8 million, 4.4 million. You can see here. And were these resources a grant or a loan? And it's probably very hard to see on my shared screen, but it's a loan. Here it shows finance, and it shows aid loan excluding debt reorganization. So this is a type of finance, but it's definitely a loan, which is typical of the World Bank provision of resources. So that is this exercise. Does anybody have any questions? All right, sorry. Okay, all right. So let me just go ahead and go to the next one. Maybe Anna, you can paste that in the chat as well. Okay, so the next one is just like, I know we're reaching the end. So I'm just going to show you quickly here. Like this is like if you were to look for New Zealand funded projects in Kiribati. The Kiribati would be the recipient country, and then New Zealand would be the publisher. Explore the results, and then you see that there are 57 active projects. If you wanted to look at what activities are targeting gender as a significant or principal objective in Syria, let's look at Syria as the recipient country, and then we click on more filters. And then you would search for the gender policy marker, and you would select gender as a principal objective, gender as a significant objective, and then we would explore those results. And you can see there are 307 active projects that list gender as a significant or principal objective. And the last one is to look at activities in Chad that are humanitarian. So you would select Chad as the recipient country, and then again here, click on the more filters and then choose yes, that it's a humanitarian activity. And then you would explore the results. And again, you have the projects that are in Chad, which I think there are quite a few. Okay, 155 active projects in Chad that are listed as being humanitarian. All right. Let's go to the next one. All right. So the next one is on the country development finance data tool. So I think I've showed you a couple of these before, but this first question here on how humanitarian funding was allocated in 2022 by country, organization, and sector. we would go to these main data dashboards. And click on more filters and then go to humanitarian. And so this will show you how humanitarian resources were allocated. So you can see that, like, obviously it makes sense that most humanitarian funding went to emergency response sector. And that's one example there. I don't know, Anna, are there questions coming in the chat, or just I want to make sure?
No.
Okay.
But I think we probably have to stop after this series of exercises because I know we have a hard stop. So, but
Yes.
just
Okay.
No questions.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't continuing if we had somebody who wanted to ask a question. Okay. Okay. So this is the sort of, I mean, this is just one example. I mean, if we want to look at spending by the European Commission in 2021 and 2022, we could go to the probably the easiest way. Actually, you go. Let's do the custom data download. Just go to the custom data download, and we can choose reporting organization. We would select a grouping because the European Commission publishes under multiple organizations. So we would choose the European Commission. We'd probably want to add the reporting organization here so we can see which entity we want spending, and then we want 21 and 22. And then you can kind of see, oh wait, sorry, I didn't filter by the country, Congo. All right, and there we have the second question, which is like basically spending in 2021 and 2022 by the EC and DRC. So maybe I will stop there and hand it back over to Anna so we can sort of bring this to a close.
Thanks, Sarah. Great. Yeah, so again, as we warned you from the beginning, it's a lot of information, and we hope, that this is just giving you a flavor of kind of what data is there and like what you might be able to do with it, and start kind of piquing your brain a little bit about, what you might be able to do in your own context with the IATI data. So we definitely wanted just to reiterate that this is just a beginning, hopefully, of the journey, not an end. And I'm going to go ahead and paste our emails in here as well. So definitely feel free to contact Sarah or myself directly if you have any questions or you want to follow up, because we didn't put that in the presentation, which we should have. Lesson learned for next time, but please feel free to contact us directly. We're always available to help. But just a few ways that you also might want to engage further with IATI as you kind of start this whole IATI journey. And this is just, as we said, the beginning of it today, just to give you a flavor. And there's other ways you can stay engaged. So one would be, of course, to explore our data use tools that Sarah has presented, CDFD, D portal, and data store search. For those of you who are really interested in the data and how it's processed, we have those guidance documents that Sarah pointed out, especially in regards to CDFD. And also, we would love for you to share this with other colleagues who might be interested. And again, please feel free to pass on our information. But one other thing we wanted to note that's coming up that's really important, we're really excited about, is our first kind of foray into the e-learning world. So we will be launching an online training course specifically for civil society organizations in Q3 of this year. And so this is really a much more expansive, say like 20 to 25 hour course that walks you through essentially everything we've done today, but in much greater detail, and really is a great introduction to how to use this data, what purposes it can be used for, and goes a lot slower pace than what we were able to do today. So we're happy once that's live in Q3 to share that with our colleagues at CanWatch for sharing with all of you. I know that there's going to be a survey sent out after this in terms of, how did we do and what would be useful for next time. But if you would like to be kind of an early adopter for that course or like to share some feedback on the course with us, we would love that. So please share that in the survey. And we'll get back to you with more information. And then just two quick last things to note, ways that you can keep engaged with us. One is also the help desk that we offer. So again, you can come to Sarah and I directly, but for any other questions as well, if you feel more comfortable just with like an email help desk kind of thing, we do have this support@iatistandard.org email address. There's always going to be someone there to respond to you within like 2 working days on any queries that you might have, on the data, on the tools, on publishing, any of this. And lastly, shout out to our online portal and community, iatconnect.org, which is where you can join to kind of connect with other data users, people who are publishing the data, transparency advocates. So definitely would encourage you to go to iatconnect.org and check it out. There's a lot of information on how people are using the data, what questions people have about the data, and it's a way to kind of engage with your peers who are also kind of in the same boat as you as well. So it's 2:45 on the dot in New York. So I think we will stop there. But thank you so much for bearing with us over the past hour and 15 minutes. We know it was a lot of information, but we're really excited to see where this collaboration with CanWatch can go. And please do feel free to contact Sarah or I directly, or to pass on our email to anyone that might be interested in learning more about IATI data. So we will stop there, and we will see you in the IATI sphere, hopefully on IATI Connect or another CanWatch event. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.